Are are we live? Yes, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome on to one of my Saturday streams. And most excitedly, this Saturday is a D&D stream. We're gonna be talking about Dungeons and Dragons, y'all. Today we've got a little bit of a two-parter. We're going to be starting off today by discussing some of the house rules I run in my game, both the ones I've taken from other places or some common variants people like to run with, and some of the ones I've invented myself and have developed over the course of my current campaign. After that, however, we're going to be rolling into a shorter story time today. And we're going to see what happens to the party when they first arrive in Arenna. Now, I do want to start with a bit of a, "Hi, Wood Bogus, how's it going?" With a little bit of a sad announcement. Looking through the different streams I've downloaded up to now, and looking at getting them into the archive, I have found one of my D&D streams did not get downloaded in time, and so will not be able to get added into the archive. And unfortunately, it was the last big story time that we had. So we'll have to do a bit of a big recap when we get to story time today, but hopefully we can hit all the major points. Yes, that is the big rip right there. But thank you all for showing up. So let's take a look now and see what we'll be discussing. So, the first thing we're going to talk about today are house rules. For anybody who's played a lot of big role-playing games that are very rule-heavy, you'll know that it's almost inevitable that many of the rules you end up playing with are actually house variants that everyone's just sort of subconsciously agreed upon, or that are just kind of natural to how things work. I don't think house rules are that new to most people, and I think everyone out there has a few that they always try to get into whatever game they're playing. But today we're going to be going over some of the house rules I use, why I like them, why I use them, and then diving into some of the rules I've invented over time or have made specifically for my party and my campaign. So, let's take a quick swap and start going through some of the house rules I bring to my campaign. So, starting at the beginning and moving on through. The first thing actually to remember, whenever you're approaching home rules, house rules, whether you're going to be DMing with them, whether you're a player wanting to bring them in, the number one thing to know is all of the house rules I'll be showing you, I play in my current campaign. However, all of them were discussed ahead of time with my party as being rules I wanted to bring into this campaign, or I built alongside my players. Rules that, due to the way they were playing, we all kind of slowly brought in to encourage either some realism, to ease up certain aspects, to fix certain aspects, or in some cases, to add in a system of rules for certain areas of the game that the original designers didn't feel needed as much attention. Which, as we begin, my first rule I like to call cool stuff at the dump. This is just something from all the sessions I've played of D&D, whether as a player, as a DM, just someone running through it. There's something about the intelligence stat that simply invites always dumping it unless you're a wizard. Now, I understand having dump stats up there, and I have no problem with people dumping certain stats. It just feels like intelligence sort of gets the weakest rap when it comes to thinking of a tertiary stat. Wisdom will always affect your ability to see what's happening around you, to be able to perceive or find something. And so it tends to take a bit of a head shot over the secondary effects of intelligence, being able to remember something or study through a library to find something you need. So I wanted to give intelligence a bit of a stronger feeling of being intelligent, and to give it a little bit of a secondary effect to help discourage it always being the go-to dump stat and being more of a decision that of the stats I have, the one I'm going to dump is this because its extra proficiencies aren't what I need right now. And that is exactly what this rule does. 1/2 of your int mod you can gain in bonus skill or tool proficiencies or in languages. So this means if at the end of building your character, you have an intelligence mod of 2, then 1/2 of that mod would be 1. So you can now choose a skill to gain proficiency in, a tool, or learn a new language from the beginning. I think this rule has helped some of my players feel like there's a reason to just put 1 point into intelligence on a level up. Just get an extra language, an extra skill proficiency, a way to get some things that normally you would have to burn an entire feature on, but don't really break the game in having too many of them. At least, I haven't seen any of my players trying to break the game through this. Well, at the same time, it really doesn't suck to not have an extra language or an extra tool proficiency. This is a very small rule, but one that I like, and how it kind of changes how intelligent players feel or intelligent characters play. The next is a rule system that I'd actually been working on for a little while. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, there is currently not an official flanking rule set. There's an official variant people can play with, where if you successfully flank an enemy, you're granted advantage, meaning you get to roll your d20 twice and take the highest roll. However, there's something about that that's just never really sat right with me. I wouldn't say it's too weak or too powerful inherently. There was just something about advantage on the flank that didn't quite feel great to play with. With so many features in the game, so many spells or abilities designed around giving advantage or disadvantage, sometimes simply burning 5 extra feet of movement for it, or successfully flanking a character only to find out that due to another character's spell, the flanking advantage was already applied, just made it feel like a very ununique, unintuitive system to play the game. So instead, I decided to play around and create a new couple of conditions in the game called Flanked and Swarmed. Whenever a creature has at least 2 enemies adjacent to it, where 2 of those enemies are on opposite sides of the target, it is affected by the flanked condition. When attacking a flanked creature with a melee attack roll, all attacking creatures gain a bonus to hit equal to the number of the flanked creature's enemies that are adjacent to it. What this means is if you simply have one character on either side, you have 2 enemies adjacent to that creature, and so you would gain a +2 to hit that creature. However, if you and an ally are on opposite sides of an enemy, and a third ally steps up and stands on a different side of that enemy, you instead of a +3, 1 for each adjacent foe. This helps build, I think, a bit of a feeling of finally ganging up on a creature, or when that swarm of goblins rushes the level 6 character, now there's a moment where If enough of them start swarming you, you can start to feel overwhelmed, even by a weak collection. However, when attacking a flanked creature with a ranged attack roll, you suffer a -1 to the total flanking bonus to melee attack rolls. I wanted to give a little bit of a restriction here. Imagining two people going in to flank a creature and just having your archers gain a massive bonus seemed a bit over the top in my brain. So instead, ranged will always be a little worse, but not terrible. Still being able to take advantage of an overwhelmed target. The flanking bonus, however, caps at 5. At this point, the creature is considered swarmed. I wanted to put a bit of a cap to this feature as well. Imagining a very large creature having 20 or so characters able to surround it, getting a +20 to hit to everybody was a bit over the top in my mind. Even worse yet when you fully surround your players with small creatures. So there's a bit of a cap being a +5 bonus to hit. And that is kind of set to its own condition, swarmed. I've been playing around with this now the whole time I've been running my current campaign. And I will say, the first couple of sessions, it takes a minute to get used to. Once you start getting into it, though, and just looking at who is flanked and how many enemies are around, the numbers start becoming pretty intuitive. Yep, there's 3 enemies, that's a +3. There's only 2 here, so a +2. This does add a bit more of number modification into the system, which can, of course, skew things aggressively one way or the other, but so far, this has only seemed to make fights feel more interesting in combat. Being actually able to maneuver around, take advantage, or to actually feel a small concern once that 5th bandit steps adjacent to you. A small thing to become overwhelmed. Next up is a very basic variant, one that exists out there and that many people end up running with a lot of the time, called encumbrance. Now, I will admit, I'm not the kind to be measuring everybody's weight or how much everybody currently has in their bag or loaded into the wagon, how everything works. But I do like having a variant encumbrance rule in my games just to sort of have a rule to fall back on when a player or anybody is trying to make an action where they're like, okay, I want to try to carry this person somewhere. And you can ask simply, how much do they and what they're wearing weigh? I think when I'm looking at encumbrance rules, I tend to not think so much about what is packed away, so much as how much an important object getting carried is going to be. Hey there, Gremlin, how are you doing? Oh, hey, Eric, about to play some Magic, but thought I'd pop in for a moment. Hey there, Reaganomics. We're just talking about some house rules and playing D&D. I hope you have some fun playing Magic, though we are going to be having some story time later. And you're drinking again, Gremlin? Well, I'm glad you're doing good. Now, and a little extension I wanted to add on to the encumbrance rule was just something for when looking at flight, flying, and how I imagine things to be a bit more difficult with it. Oh, not drunk here. I thought you were saying you were drinking again. I'm glad to see you're recovering well then, Gremlin. Here's my little rule I call carrier pigeon. Encumbrance is doubly effective against flight, meaning instead of a -15, it's a -20. Instead of, let's hear it, it was a -5, it goes to -20, instead of -15, -40, and immobile happens at about the same stage. This is just a little thing as I imagine trying to fly with weight to be a bit more difficult than trying to drag something across the ground. Oh, had a good night. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. I was very happy to see you were able to get back in on the phone a little bit later. Uh, Next is a little rule I actually picked up when I was watching some other DMs kind of discussing some issues they had had. In Dungeons and Dragons, there's a couple of very easy healing spells that clerics get access to early on. However, one of them, Healing Word, is very unique. It is a bonus action, meaning a player is allowed to make a major action and use it on the same turn. However, it is also a ranged heal, meaning that a cleric is able to attack and stand up a downed ally with a bonus action while not having to move anywhere near them. This is why I've added in a rule I call whack-a-mole in an attempt to prevent players from being stuck in a cycle of knockdown, healing, standing back up, knockdown, at range, at no real movement or real feeling of weight behind it. Under a very specific set of circumstances, Healing Word will require a full action to use, and this is only when the target is unstabilized and at range. This is a way to simply prevent a small abuse of how Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition handles healing and unconsciousness. Now, this does mean if the target's willing to move adjacent to them and use something like a Cure Wounds, or if they're willing to commit their full turn to healing their ally, it'll still work as expected. It just requires them to make slightly more of a commitment to the action. Now then, we move into one of my stranger rules, and one that a monk in my party is becoming very excited to start making better use of. Something I call intentional falling, though maybe would be better listed as plunging attack. You may declare a plunging attack when you have an attack action and at least half of your movement remaining. The target must be a normal-sized creature or larger. You can only declare a plunging attack if you would land within your weapon's reach of the target. Each turn of falling, you descend up to 500 feet. When making a plunging attack, you will make an attack roll. On a hit, you roll normal damage plus 1 additional weapon die per 10 feet of falling, up to a max of 19. These die are not affected by crits. On a miss, you take normal falling damage. On a hit, your falling damage is reduced from d6s to d4s. Everyone, I think, has been in a situation in a role-playing game, hopefully, where they've been in a position where they can look down on an enemy, whether they're on the top of a building, on top of a cliff, or they're flying high above a mighty creature. And they've had the thought, well, if all else fails, let's drop on him. And I wanted to spend a bit of time plotting out some rules to make this both rewarding, fun, and dangerous. Simply what I did here is I took the normal falling rules of you roll an additional d6 of falling damage for every 10 feet you fall, and applied that force to the weapon, adding a weapon die to your damage. Additionally, I wanted to give a bit of a reward to it beyond the damage, and that being increasing a character's chance of surviving the fall. Not by a lot, but simply by moving that d6 to a d4, falling 20, 30, even 40 feet to get that juicy extra 4d whatever your weapon die is, starts to seem a little more worth it. Now, none of my players have actually been able to successfully make use of this rule yet, but now that my monk has acquired both slow falling and, recently, the ability to teleport, he says he's very excited to start delivering the pain to any particularly tough beasties. And I have to admit, I'm always a sucker for a bit of risk-reward play. And now we're going to move into probably one of my most play-tested rule systems. One that has changed a lot over the course of the campaign, as I have come across a party that absolutely loves to sit down in a tavern and have some drinks with each other and spend a long time chatting and doing things while drunk. Now, Dungeons and Dragons does not have very good rules for drinking or getting drunk. In fact, in certain aspects, they have no rules at all. What's the difference between powerful spirits? Not really important. Are there different stages of being drunk? Well, you can always simply use the poison status effect, but I've spent some time and I'm very proud of the system I've come up with. And so, here is my drunkenness rule. Whenever you drink, make a Constitution saving throw. On a half, you'll take half drunken damage. First, you will roll the drink's strength die and subtract 1, and you'll add that many drunken points to your character. Beer, grogs, meads run about a d4. Wine or liqueur starts at a 1d6. Strong spirits, rum, whiskey, or gin will instead be a 2d4. And in the world, there can always exist some specialized drinks that can have higher strengths or different negatives to your resistance rolls. Your max drunkenness, or your stage of drunkenness, equals, to be buzzed, is your Constitution modifier. While buzzed, you have advantage against any saving throw to resist fear. You also have disadvantage on insight checks, but you get to add your proficiency mod to persuasion checks, even if you are already proficient. A slightly buzzed person tends to be a bit more incorrigible, a little slower to pick up on lies, but quicker to make friends. You are drunk, however, when your drunkenness reaches your Constitution modifier plus your proficiency. While drunk, you have advantage against any saving throw to resist fear. You are poisoned, as long as this status persists. Your passive abilities are also reduced by half. This would be your perception or insight. And whenever you drink, you may gain temporary hit points equal to the drink's strength roll. So, as soon as a person becomes truly drunk, and they decide to take an extra shot of whiskey, they also get an extra 2d4 of temporary hit points. They can ignore a bit of pain, essentially, though they always risk of pushing themselves further down the chart. Your character is considered sloshed once your drunkenness reaches your Constitution modifier plus 2 times your proficiency. Once sloshed, you are affected both by the drunkenness state and all of its effectors. However, your speed is also reduced by half. You have disadvantage on all wisdom, intelligence, and charisma saving throws. You are immune to fear. Whenever you drink, you choose to gain temporary hit points equal to the drink's maximum strength roll. So instead of, on that extra whiskey shot, gaining 2d4 temporary hit points, you gain the max of 8. Though be careful. is there's only one step beyond sloshed, and that is blackout drunk. To become blackout drunk, you have to get your drunkenness points to equal 3 times your constitution modifier plus your proficiency. Once you are blackout, you're affected by sloshed and all of its modifiers. However, whenever you're the target or affected by a spell, if that spell has a minimum intelligence requirement, you count as having 1. This makes you immune to detect thoughts, hideous laughter, Tosh's hideous laughter, telepathic bond, Rory's telepathic bond, psychic scream, and synaptic static. Also, every 10 minutes, you make a constitution saving throw versus falling unconscious at a DC of 10. You do recover 1d4 drunkenness every hour. So if things have gotten a bit out of hand, if you take a nap, you should be right as rain fairly soon. And so, this is definitely the rule system I'm personally most proud of, and the one my players engage with the most. It really kind of makes drinking a bit more interesting in certain ways. Ultimately, trying to base drunkenness around constitution modifier does run into a couple of issues for me. While I enjoy this rule greatly, I do know some of my more hardy characters who wish they could get drunk quicker find themselves having to knock back a lot of drinks before they really get into it. However, things do need to be a little difficult, as it can be equally as weird when a character can take a sip of beer and end up getting truly hammered. And so, here we have it. My rule set for drunkenness. After this, we have also a rule I've come up with for my world. D&D 5th edition does already have existing rules for travel, but I found that once I had finished making my world and populating it, everything I had was a bit too far apart for the travel system to really feel comfortable. And that's the most important thing to remember with home rules. If there's ever any time that an existing rule system is causing pains within how you want to play, is fighting you on the system you're trying to run, try to fix it. Try to find those small or big edits that everyone on the table will enjoy and will remove as much as the discomfort or boredom that can occur in certain systems. Here, as you can see, my world was a bit too big, so I ended up greatly increasing general travel speeds. This has done a good job of shrinking down travel time in my world from technically being about a week to being half a week in most cases. A change that I think is greatly appreciated. Here, I actually have a long system of rules I won't be reading the entire way through, as I actually snagged them from someone online. Dungeons & Dragons has some vague references in its rule systems to creating poisons that you can use on your weapons. However, they only give a handful of examples of what some poisons might be, what their DCs could act as, and how much they might cost. So with a bit of time, I was able to find a large collection of proposed poisons, homebrew ideas, and creatures to gather them from. This large collection here is just a system of poisons that can make fighting certain monsters at the end feel a bit more rewarding, as you can gather weapons or have an idea of what you might be facing going in. as we come to the bottom here, we also roll into my drugs rules. These are just a few homebrew drugs that I've talked about before when talking about my magic items. These are also some that have gone through a bit of play testing and a few changes over time, but I think are very fun to play with if you like what they do and what they can result in. And that is sort of the specific homebrew rules I like to play with in my campaign. Ones I've invented or appropriated from certain places that I really enjoyed having. There's certain ones like the encumbrance rule I don't play quite to the letter or try to enforce aggressively in most situations, but are good to include so that when questions about specific actions come up, you can have a rule system to fall back on. Meanwhile, some of them, like my flanking or drunkenness rules, are ones I'm very proud of that I've been building over time that I think add an interesting layer of complexity and thought to certain areas or systems in the game that don't quite receive as much attention as I like. And so, as we finish up this little time spent on looking at my rules, I'd like to check in with everybody. How is everybody doing? What do you think of any of these rules, or do you have any favorite house rules that you've either invented or always played with? Ones you think I might be interested in, or ones that have kind of led to your own good D&D stories or horrifying D&D stories? Hey there, Junie. Glad to see you're doing cozy. Oh, great. Well, thank you. If anyone's ever interested in checking, I think I've sent this before, but to try and have it here, or maybe not. Oh no. Ooh, everyone's doing good, doing good. If you'll just give me 1 second, I'm going to go double check. Ah, H rules, I believe. One moment. For anybody interested to check out these rules themselves, to read through them how you like, or to kind of see if there's any you want to bring into your own games or you want to kind of make your own edits on. Like I said, some of these I have made simply based around how my party acts, how my campaign has gone so far. The drunkenness rule set, I think, is one that many campaigns will never really need, but I find mine has very much benefited from. Some rules, like flanking, could be very exciting, but might be a little number heavy depending on the group you're working with. But any of these, any of you are free to steal, edit, or come up with your own unique takes on. Oh, your intelligence rule is very similar to one I use, and I like how you do the drunken rules. Thank you, thank you. But honestly, before we move on to story time on my end, do you guys have any rules you really like? Any you've made before? Hal Frost, how's it going? 43 minutes late. Oof, sorry, fam. Glad I could catch the rest? Hell yeah, Hal Frost. You just kind of missed a quick discussion, well, not so quick, about the house rules I run in my campaign. What they are, why I've made them, and how I use them. Do you play much Dungeons and Dragons? And if so, what are some of your favorite house rules? Or any you've worked on? If you want to see the ones I have, here's a quick little deal. You can feel free to look through them yourself. Some of them are my own creation, and some of them are taken from other places. Ah, it's fine. It's fine. Trust me. All right. Well, it seems there aren't many questions or stories about your own house rules. So, I think it's time we move on to the next part of today's stream, and one that I know many people like to come for. Let's see here. There we go. The last I played was 5th, but I was strictly rogue. Other than that, I've had a lot of 3.5 edition. Had a lot of fun, but never DM though. Okay. You are a lucky, lucky man, in my opinion. Well, I've definitely enjoyed DMing for my current group. Every session I DM just makes me crave being a player sometime. But for now, I'm simply stuck, having to invent rules to inflict upon some people. But let us now move beyond rules and into story time. And so, with that, let's fully drop into our story time voice. As I mentioned at the beginning of stream, unfortunately, one of my storytime streams didn't get successfully downloaded in time, so I will not have a copy saved up to post later. So we'll have to do a bit of a recap now, in case anyone's watching having missed the last story time several weeks ago, or in case this gets added into the archive and things feel a bit incongruous. The party met in the city-state of Scarin. Brought together by a simple desire for coin, they engaged with some hunting. However, it wouldn't be long within the city before they would discover an underground cartel of sorts, a group within the city limits that dealt with drugs, loan sharks, and kidnapping, it seemed. Over the course of several days, the party would gather what hints they could about where these people operated from, who was in charge of this criminal organization, and where they kept the children and adults that they had kidnapped for having overdue debts. Eventually, the party would find their abandoned warehouse and the ledger that would begin to give them even greater information about what happened here. But not everything would go their way, and the party would eventually have to make certain plays against the leader, Gabriel, but more importantly, his chief subordinate, a man named Gale. By eventually capturing and questioning Gale, they would find a way to convince the man to let the child that they were going to save go. And so the party made the arrangements necessary. But one member, Tortuga, accompanied by Malphite, would track this man to the city and ambush him as he brought the child from where he had been keeping it. In that ambush, though, Tortuga would lose control of himself and kill this man, for he too had been traded as a slave and could not suffer this man to live any longer. However, this would start an unfortunate chain reaction, leading to the city going up in flames. Well, only a small district of it, really. They would save the child, but they would imagine that the other slaves that Gabriel had kept locked away were likely burnt as well. In the heat of the flames, Rasmussen, the party's fighter and a dwarf, would make his way back to the warehouse and gather the evidence he would need to prove that all of this was Gabriel's doing. Once done, he would free Gale, who had announced that he would be going far west to a distant city called Andinium to meet with a man he called Jeremiah Copper. The party then would bring the evidence forward to the guards and be granted a level of clemency from the crimes that had been committed. However, during this process, it would be discovered by the city's mayor that Rasmussen was actually there as a spy for the country of Pulamont to the south of Scarin. He would be told he would be allowed to leave, but to tell the man that had sent him that should any more spies be found in their city, they would be executed. The party then would gather their stuff and make ready to leave the city, the fire spreading to only take one district and scarring a part of the city forever. Little on the nose with the fireplace, I know. I couldn't help it. Once leaving the city, the party would make their way to a nearby Polemont encampment, where Rasmussen would report his findings, where the party would gain a job from the legionary general, Felix Augustus. They would accept work, sending them to the capital of Polemont, Arenna, where they were asked to take 2 diplomats, one Aquila Andrana, the other Laius Ramus, eastward to the Elvish kingdoms to act as new dignitaries within their court. The party would take about a week traveling southward to Arenna. Along the way, there would be some party tension growing, as Tortuga, curious or nervous of the cleric pharaoh, would be found one night going through her stuff, looking for her holy symbol. Tensions would only grow later on, as when a starving child came into the campsite looking to steal some food. Malachite, the Genasi ranger, would try to shoot the girl down with arrows, only being stopped by Pharaoh and Tortuga, who refused to let a child be murdered. But as they pushed on ahead, the day would come as they entered the mountain range that they would see the city of Arenna built into the side of the mountains. Yes, Tortuga is the name of one of the party members, a wood elf monk, Tortuga Lochran, to be specific. He came to the party already injured, was the one that explained to them that coin could be made hunting. All we know about him at this stage is that he's a bit of a distrustful man, and one that had been traded into slavery in the past, and had even been traded through Scarin at one point in his life. As the party moves through the road, they round a bend in the mountain trails and see it in the distance. The capital, Arenna. A glowing white city made of marble and limestone. Arenna was made into the mountainside, a 4-tiered city that leads down into a valley where most of their farming occurs. Arenna itself is most notable not by its tiered city structure, nor by being a city built into the mountainways, but by the vast riverway it had harnessed that led into the valley. This riverway now runs down the very center of the city, starting in the topmost tier in the palace, moving into the noble lands, into the high merchants tier, and finally into the lower areas of the city, before being allowed to run off into the farming valley below. The city reflects the light of the water on its white walls, reminiscent of a vast Rome built vertically. The city stands, the jewel of Polemont, its capital. Approaching the vast marble walls, the party would make their way into the lowest district of Arenna. Even here, in the slums of the city, where buildings seem partially constructed of castaway materials, shacks, somewhat dilapidated or built into alleyways, There's a strange amount of effort here to create a feeling of wealth, of finery. A shack has a broken facing of marble, shattered in half and barely looking cleaned, propped against it, decorated to look somewhat like a small building made of marble. On the other side, castaway jewelry is hung from windowways. While the slums of Arenna are probably not a pleasant place to live, time is taken even by the peasants or the lower born here to present some level of what they have, of the beauty of the city. Moving through this lower slums, the party then moves through the lower market, an area filled with fishmongers, people trading in small, cheap foods or rotted products. Simple tools are offered and discarded fancy material. Here, the smell of the river fills the air. It is filled with a large amount of filth being at the bottom of the runoff. Here is not the most pleasant place to live, but a place with some access to water. As they exit the lower market, though, they enter almost a darker region, the lower slave market. The party looks around hesitantly, as for many of them, this is their first time being in a slave market of any kind, and Arenna's lower market is not the most pleasant of first experiences. Hundreds of humanoids are all around, some kept in cages, some simply set up in lines. These are slaves destined for salt mines, for hard manual labor or filthy jobs. Scrawny, half-starved, and not well treated, the lower slave market of Arenna promises whatever you might be looking for, but not in a condition that it would like. The party then continues onward, glancing down at the job they have been given. On their contract it reads that they will find the house they're looking for somewhere higher up. They're still in the first circle, and this says it must be within the second circle. Ahead of them, then, they see a large gatehouse of the tier that separates the first circle from the second. As everything slows up and the party approaches it, they present their contract to the guards here. Malachite watches as the guards look over their paperwork. She sees a pair of beggars tuck their hoods and make a dash behind the distracted guards. It seems people are desperate to get out of the first circle and into the second. But what those two plan to do once there is unclear. Still, Malachite says nothing. Pharaoh, too, says nothing as they watch the pair move through. They simply let them go and wonder. The guards then wave the party through. Their paperwork seems to be in order, and there's no clear sign of trick going on. The guards allow them into the second circle. Here, immediately, the smell changes. The water here is still a bit murkish in some spots, though it is clearly much higher quality than what happens once it passes through the slave market. Here, the party passes through the upper market. Jewelry stands fill the streets, though give plenty of room for carts to move through. Whereas the lower market was cluttered, almost a maze, here the road is clear, and there are many people calling out for fine foods, dresses, jewelry, weapons, blacksmith's work, and everything comes here. The party pauses as they see the road that separates this upper market from another area. In the distance, they see well-dressed people out on the streets wearing chains. It seems that there's another slave market here. And that is true. This is Arenna's upper slave market. Here one can find slaves destined for fighting pits, for house service, for much finer work than manual labor of the type that the lower markets would be sent to. Here the slaves are not kept in cages, but under close watch. They, after all, would fetch a much better price, and displaying them in a downtrodden manner is not becoming of the upper markets of Arenna. The party stops to gather themselves. Reading through the contract, they need to go no further up. They must instead follow the road heading eastward within the city. Then they can find us. There they will find the villa of the Andranas, where Aquila and Remus are living. However, Rasmussen, the dwarf, speaks up a moment, saying that he would rather not present themselves covered in travel dirt, reeking of the lower city, to these dignitaries they'll be transporting, and says that he's not going anywhere till him and the rest of the party, giving pointed eyes at a few of the filthier members, have had a good bath. And what luck! As they cast their eyes about, looking for a place they might clean, wondering if perhaps they could take some water from the waterway moving through and simply wash themselves in the street, they see a row of 6 well-kept men, clearly slaves, though dressed finely. They seem to shimmer in the light, carry large jugs to the waterway, each of them filling a jug to the maximum weight that they can carry. The 6 men gather their 6 jugs and begin down the road. Their curiosity piqued, the party makes after these men and watches as they enter into a large structure. As they explore a bit, they find out this building is exactly what they were looking for. A public bathhouse with 2 prices available. They could pay a very small amount and be allowed to use the communal bath, and they could pay a small premium and be allowed into one of the private baths. They are told while in a private bath, however, they will be offered whatever they could need. They have a small amount of food on hand, and of course, they will have any of their slaves deliver, and if they require, massage in some of this bathhouse's signature oils. Rasmussen, having found what he wanted, said that he'd be using the communal bath, and said that he wasn't leaving till he made sure every member of the party had gotten themselves cleaned up for meeting the nobles. So, begrudgingly, a few members hand over their coin and say they'll be going into the public baths as well. An idea strikes Pharaoh, though. She places her hand on the shoulder of Malachite and says to her that, while the men use the communal bath, the ladies are going to take a small dip into the private pool and maybe indulge in a bit of that oil being brought around. So Malachite and Pharaoh pay the premium to have a bit of alone time in the private baths, while the rest of the party makes way for the communal bath. Collectively, they all undress and head into the bathhouse, finding only a few other of the public in and bathing around. Settling into the large pool, Rasmussen, Tortuga, and Milo begin talking about themselves, just a bit about where they grew up. Milo talks about where he was born and how things on this trip have been a bit strange. Rasmussen talks about the times he's ever had to deal with dignitary and other finer people, and how this bath is just what he needed. Tortuga remains mostly quiet. He seems a bit uncomfortable in this environment, though makes sure to bathe himself well. Pharaoh and Malachite, however, make their way into a back room, and as they open it, they find the room to be warm, humid, more of a sauna than a bath, really. They step in and lower themselves into the pool of clean water. After a minute's time, a couple of slaves enter in, the first adding a pot of freshly heated water into the pool, the second presenting a bowl of not really an oil, but more of a lotion. It seems to be made of aloe and is very slick and relaxing. The two slaves remain, seeing if there's anything else the esteemed guests would need. But Pharaoh tells them that'll be all, and that the two would like a bit of privacy. Taking a moment, Pharaoh observes as Malachite takes a bit of the lotion and begins working it into her green skin. Shimmering like a jade statue, Malachite fully applies and relaxes a bit. Pharaoh looks over the stone-like skin of Malachite, and her mind is cast back to that moment that Malachite shot the child with an arrow, saying she was clearly a thief and didn't understand why anybody would want to save her. Pharaoh stares at Malachite, who slowly begins to realize she's being stared at. Pharaoh's mouth opens as she debates what to say next. She casts her mind back to the last sacrifice she had made to her god. An old woman alone on a roof, struggling and screaming, breaking free of Pharaoh's grasp, and Pharaoh having to desperately silence her forever. Pharaoh turns to Malachite and says, "I have a secret I would like to tell you, and a deal I would like to make." Malachite goes silent as Pharaoh smiles warmly. She doesn't know how carefully she'll have to play this, but she begins to explain some things to Malachite. Things she'll need help with, and things she'll want to do. It would be some 10-15 minutes, and the door to the private room would open. Pharaoh and Malachite would emerge, both freshly oiled and looking very clean. They would approach the boys of the party and join them in the communal baths. They would all like to discuss what to do next. First things first is find the house that these dignitaries are staying in. Of course, they would put their wagon aside for now. They don't know if the house will have room for them to store it. But they try to think how best to approach the dignitaries. Do they immediately open up, showing them the contract, or present themselves as they are? How best to sell it? Eventually, professionality wins out, and they agree they will open with the contract, that they are the ones hired by Felix, and that they will be escorting the dignitaries from here on. And I will take a bit of a pause to say, yes, I almost missed it. We have a few bots in the chat, and as always, hello, bots. I think I'm fine with the number of viewers I have. Ray, I'm glad you like these story times. I enjoy giving them. And I hope everybody likes where this story goes. I was very excited to be telling this part as I couldn't quite capture it well. My party had a very exciting time this session, describing themselves undressing, cleaning up, and one of the characters, Malachite, in fact took a bit of a monologue to describe herself undressing, oiling up, and bathing. I think after having so much seriousness going on in past sessions, the moment for a bit of levity was well appreciated. Halfrost, no. Halfrost, no. This is a very simple story time, and I wish not to break away too much. Yes, though, you are free to imagine a freshly oiled pharaoh, until of course Juniper says to stop it. So quickly, before she can comment anything. Alrighty then. From there, the party gathered their things and took a quick detour to find a stable to leave their wagon and their animals in. They would then gather up and head down the roadway until they find the large gated house. Well, house-like structure. As they push through the front gate, instead of being inside a building, they're inside a square that the building surrounds. A small garden and fountain sits here. Flowers grow all around them with benches set out. And as they look about at the bottom floor, they see stained glass surrounds them, lining the different doors set about them. The stained glass, however, seems to be not able to be seen through, simply a colorful feature here. The party pauses, looking about, before they approach the main door they see. While they're still a few feet away, however, the door swings open, and standing there in front of them is a woman, dressed in a very flowing white dress, long golden hair hanging about her, with the slightly pointed ears of a half-elf. A woman with a very dignified stance, but a very knowing expression, smiles at the party, and introduces herself. Why, hello. I am Aquila and Arenna. And what are you doing in my garden? The party had a very interesting introduction to the beautiful woman standing in front of them. This was one of the dignitaries they had come to collect. She seemed fairly young for the position, somewhere in her early to mid-20s. Beautiful, no doubt, and very noble in her stance and dress. But something about her seems a bit too knowledgeable. She smiles very big, but her eyes are clearly measuring each member of the party that stands here. Without much more than a moment of hesitation, Rasmussen presents them, holding out the contract and saying that they're the party that will be taking her and Ramus to Corella, the capital of the Elven Kingdom east of here. She claps and says she's so excited that she thought they wouldn't be arriving for another couple of days. That if they're okay with it, she would like to wait to leave until the morning and to have them here for dinner. The party agrees and are welcomed into the house. Stepping through the main doors, they look about and are struck by something magical. The colorful glass that they had thought was just decoration seems to serve a very important function. While it is still colorful, it seems from the inside of the house, the glass has more of a one-sided nature, as they can see quite clearly out and into the gardens. No wonder Aquila was able to greet them. Keela smiles at them all and begins complimenting Malachite. She said she had never seen someone with such beautiful green skin, like jade. She then offers to show them to their rooms that they will be sleeping in tonight, and takes them to a wing of the villa, showing them rooms that seem to have one point been servant bedrooms, or maybe guest bedrooms. All of them are completely abandoned, however. The party then sets about putting away their stuff. Without a moment's hesitation, Aquila asks them if they would like to go shopping, while dinner is being prepared. Taken aback, the party takes a moment. They had just been through the markets, and there wasn't anything they could think of. But Aquila pushes, saying that, if nothing else, she would like the two ladies, Malachite and Farah, to come with them, as she has an idea for some gifts she'd like to buy the brave adventurers taking her on this journey. Pharaoh ruffles a bit, seeing all the attention being given to Malachite. It seems, whatever they had talked about in the bathhouse, she was feeling a bit possessive. So she agreed to go along with Aquila as Malachite went shopping. And as two members were going, the party decides to all go together, agreeing to escort Aquila to the market and look about a bit. She claps and is excited to go as she prepares herself. She tells one of the servants to have dinner ready for when they return, and invites the party with her out into the streets and back up the way they had come to the market square. As soon as they are in the upper market, Aquila grabs Pharaoh and Malachite and begins marching them straight away to a large stand displaying dresses and jewelry. It seems she did already have in mind what she wanted to get them. Without much interest in these bits of finery, the rest of the party, Milo, Rasmussen, and Tortuga, make their way to a nearby blacksmith and have a look through his wares, looking over some daggers and weapons he has, any armor he has on sale, and getting a feeling for the general area. Approaching the jewelry stand, Aquila turns to Malachite, who she has quickly established as being her favorite, taps her on the nose and asks her what, amongst all the jewelry, she thinks is the best. What would she like the most? Malachite is taken aback. She's honestly never had anyone purchase something for her before, and has had such little experience with jewelry. Looking about at all the golds, the gems, silver armbands, and headpieces, she's stunned for a moment. Aquila takes her measure for a moment, and then reaches out and pulls a set of jade earrings held in a golden frame. Not very large or gaudy, but very impressive. She holds them up a moment, comparing them to Malachite's skin, and says, "You would look most beautiful in these." She then turns to the store owner and asks how much for the jewelry. And both Farah and Malachite are a bit stunned when the woman says it would be 100 gold pieces for these simple pieces. Aquila takes a moment and then looks about. Looking around in the crowd, a devious smile, or smirk, breaks her face for just a second, and then it's put away as she puts on an expression of concern, of being lost, and twirls her hair a bit. Confused by this change, Pharaoh stares at Aquila, while Malachite seems simply enraptured by her presence. Suddenly, a noble man seems to break from the crowd and approach Aquila. He greets her as a familiar friend and asks if she had received his gift that he had sent a week ago. Aquila smiles very big and thanks the man, saying that his jewelry is most beautiful, and she looks forward to the next chance she'll be able to wear it at a dinner party. He then immediately invites her to an affair he is having tomorrow evening, but Aquila says, unfortunately, she'll be going away as a dignitary and won't be around for some time. She then sighs and says she's in fact had to pack everything away. As she says this, she sadly places the earrings back where she had grabbed them from the stand. The man immediately stops her motion and says, "Well then, I suppose I owe you a going-away gift, my most beautiful Aquila," and offers the purchase the earrings she had been admiring for her. Aquila smiles brightly and says she couldn't possibly ask for it, but the man insists, buying the earrings. He has them wrapped and presents them to her, saying he hopes to see her in them whenever she should return from her great adventure. She then bids the man adieu, kissing him on his hand, and watches wistfully as he travels into the crowd. As soon as he is out of sight, her expression changes to one of simple self-indulgence. She pulls out the wrapped earrings, unwraps them, and hands them to Malachite, saying, "Here, for you. I think they are very suited to you." Malachite's eyes go wide as she accepts the earrings. Having just seen this woman successfully get the man to buy her exactly what she wanted, and for it to be his own idea, Malachite immediately becomes a very big fan of Aquila Arenna. Putting in the earrings, the ladies go searching quickly before they finally find the rest of the party members and gather up, returning to the Arenna villa. They arrive with Malachite making sure to keep close to Aquila. After a bit of walking, Aquila even offers to hold Malachite's hand as they walk. It seems she had made a very quick friend. They return to the villa and enter into the dining hall to find meals are being placed about, and that dinner will be ready soon. However, Milo speaks up, noticing that they're still missing the other dignitary, asking where Remus is. Immediately, Aquila's pleased mood seems to fracture, as she explains that the boar is likely in the library, and gives Milo the directions. Milo seems taken aback for a moment, but then figures he should go tell Remus that dinner is ready, and perhaps get the first look at this other dignitary. He's grown a bit concerned, having watched a bit of what Aquila has done so far, but perhaps this is all simply how nobles act. Making his way through the villa, he eventually finds the corner door, and as he opens it, he's immediately in a rainbow of lights. The small library sports a few small shelves and a single table to sit at. However, all of the walls seem to be made of that one-way painted glass. But as all the light is filtered through, the room is a beautiful menagerie of colors. At the table, he sees a simple dressed man, someone you would be forgiven to think is a lower merchant, sat at a table, arrayed in front of a dozen different open tomes, books, ledgers, and scrolls. He seems to be very deep into a strangely decorated book, its cover holding no title, but simply decorated to have the impression of being made of leaves. In silence, Milo stares at this man for a minute. The door had opened with a sound, so he waits for the man to respond. But after a couple of minutes passes with nothing, Milo clears his throat and introduces himself, saying that he is Milo, under the bridge, and that he's looking for Remus. The man turns suddenly to look at Milo, taking his measure for a moment, He says that he is Ramus. Asks why Milo is here, and Milo explains he's part of the party here to take them to Corella. The man immediately begins packing away 6 or so of these tomes he had been reading into a bag beside him, stands up and asks, when are they leaving? He's ready to go now. Milo then apologizes, explaining that they'll be going in the morning and that he had simply come to introduce himself and to tell Ramus that dinner is ready. Ramus gives a deep sigh, placing his bag down, and says, fine, he'll have a meal, but he hopes they'll be going before first light. He then walks past Milo into the hallway. As Milo is stunned there for a moment, he hears the man say, well, come on. And Milo quickly snaps into following, right behind the man. Milo is very confused. Not by the man's actions or behavior, but more so about them when compared to Aquila. These were the 2 dignitaries Felix Augustus had sent them to collect. These were the 2 that were supposed to work together. Milo found himself wondering, why these 2? Are they related? Are they betrothed? They're so different. Still, Ramus would make his way to the dining hall and join the mostly seated party, taking a spot to keep a space between him and most of the people, the table being large enough to accommodate it. He seems to want to keep enough space for him to pull out a couple of the books that he can read while eating. However, just as he's preparing to put a tome on the table, Milo enters in behind him and sits next to him, not wanting the man to be alone during a meal. The food is served. As the party enjoys their first really well-cooked and presented meal since they had started this journey, there's a sudden banging noise as the main gate to the garden is thrown open wide violently. The party rise from the table as they hear echoing in the garden square. Aquila Andrana, we are here to collect the debts you and your family are owing to our employer. From the Andrana family, an order of 100 platinum pieces. And from Aquila herself, 2,000 gold pieces. The party hears footsteps entering into the garden. As they rush to the window, they see a group of over a dozen men arrayed in the Andrana Square. Armed to the teeth, it seems, by their announcement, a group of debt collectors have arrived. And amongst them is a unique figure, one some of them have not seen before, but everyone has heard the stories. A man dressed in simple garb, a pair of axes on each of his belt, and a distinct tattoo across his chest. This is one of the Scarpi exiles, known as an Upvakni. Similar to the Vikings, these men are known for their prowess and their willingness to sell themselves into harsh combat service. Whatever the Andrana family and Aquila herself owes, it seems, purchasing an Upvakni to help with the debt collectors was not even something that the purchaser would sniff at. The party slowly turns to Aquila sat at the table. A look of annoyance, concern, and embarrassment flashes across Andrana's face before it is all under control again, and she smiles sweetly. What should we do? Malachite's weapons are immediately drawn, as Rasmussen gives a deep sigh and loads a bolt into his crossbow. This was not part of the contract they had been expecting. And there, my good friends, is where we will be leaving story time for the evening. Thank you so much for everyone showing up, and I hope you all enjoyed both the rules I've presented as some of my favorite home rules or systems I've developed, as well as the Bathhouse story time, meeting Aquila, and seeing things will not be so simple as hoped. Right when it gets good, yep, I have to cliffhanger y'all. Keep you coming back next Saturday for the next story time. Plus, I wanted to make sure the bathhouse was the big focus of today's story, as I know everyone enjoys a good bathhouse episode. Thank you everyone for coming around, and I hope you all enjoyed the story, enjoyed my telling, and are feeling excited for next time. But I was able to reach the end of my story with a little bit of extra time. So, if anybody has any questions about what happened, want to tell some of their own stories. So, actually, CZ, unfortunately, one of my big VODs I didn't get downloaded in time. And so we are missing one of my story times. However, I do have my first 3 streams of D&D already uploaded and saved to an archive channel. If you want to give me 1 second. Yep, just archive. You can check out all the VODs I do have archived here. And these are my first 3 story times, along with me going over some of the stuff I've homebrewed for this campaign, whether it's some of the nation's lore, some of my homebrew races and classes, or some of the magical items I have created for it. Also, you can find the story times. There will be one missing, unfortunately, and I cannot say sorry enough about that. But you should be able to get a good impression of how the party met and how their first mission started, if not ended. And I will be, as soon as this stream's over, downloading this one and working to get it uploaded quickly. So if you missed any part of the stream, you should be able to find it at the archive. One last thing, I will be reposting the rules that we talked about today. Let's see if that didn't come out right. H rules. There we go. Thank you, Undercooked. And here you can find the home rules I've either invented, stolen, or just love to use in my current campaign. And I encourage anyone to play around with them if they would like. Or, honestly, if anyone ever wants to DM me about their own rules ideas, or any changes they would make to mine that they think I would enjoy, please do not hesitate. I love getting feedback on anything I've homebrewed or anything I'm running. You're welcome for the story, little nephew Reaganomics. And I sure hope everybody else enjoyed the story time. So, though, we still have a couple of minutes. If anybody would like any questions or clarifications about things that have been going on with the party, if you would like to hear if anyone's small backstories or what you should know about them up to this point, or if anybody simply wants to share a story that they remember from their own Dungeons and Dragons experience, stuff like bathhouse scenes or learning that some people you were helping weren't totally forthcoming about what was going on. Oh, Halfrost, you want... Well, I guess I can spare one. Halfrost. Ara ara. Love you too, Gremlin. Thank you very much. So go ahead, give a couple of minutes here. And actually, while I'm waiting to see if anyone has any questions, I am actually going to go ahead and get a poll up and running to. I think that's how that works. Might not be. Gosh dang it. How do I get a poll? I know there's a way to do this. Give me 2 seconds. Maybe at poll? No. Gosh darn it. I've done this so many times before. I simply can't remember it. Hmm. Let's hear. One more try. There it is. Okay. Got the command. Do not worry. So, and this is a poll for what would you like to see on the next stream? We have a few options. I'm wondering if you got. Oh, thank you very much for the cheer. 1 bit coming in. Hit me up with those as often as you want. I love the 1 bits. Let's hear. Would you guys like to do some character backgrounds? Would you like to hear some of the stuff about the different characters in the party? Their races, their classes, the parts of their backstories that don't spoil what comes up later? Would you guys like to see some nation lore? I've made over 74 countries, and I think we've discussed the lore of 2 of them so far. While there's a lot to work through, I don't want to flood them all at once, so I need to wait till you guys are feeling ready. Thank you, Halfrost, for the next cheer. And finally, of course, just a full story time. Just a stream where all we do is go through story time and spend extra time to get through a very large portion. That way we could get through a lot all at once for you guys. Thank you, Halfrost. Thank you, Rage. So, let's get this poll posted so you all can get a good influence on what's coming next. Take a break from the Bit War. And please ask any questions, share any stories, or vote what you'd like to see next D&D stream. Thank you for the bits, Reaganomics. Oh Lord. Y'all are so excitable and I love it. Oh no. Oh god. You guys, please. Halfrost, that's too many at once. You're making it unfair. It's fine. It's fine, Reaganomics. You don't have to go. You don't have to go hard. Today is a lighthearted stream. Just D&D and friends. Yes, danger, Cheese Knight. Thank you. That's okay, Reaganomics. That's probably for the best at this point. How Frost tends to take things to the umpteenth level. All right. Wow. I sure hope you all had a good time. And for anybody not able to D&D, I sure hope I'm scratching that itch. I do find that when I'm really itching to play a game, going out and listening to some other stories are nice. Though I tend to be more of a fan of the horror stories than simply listening to someone's recounting. There's something about the real player dynamics and knowing that some things don't go quite as bad in my own campaigns can be very reassuring. Eric, how awkward was the bath scene to DM? Well, luckily... Oh, shit. First things first. It looks like character backgrounds has won by a long shot. So, next D&D stream, you all get to learn a bit about my characters. Both the ones in the current story we're hearing, and maybe some of the ones you have all yet to meet. I'll get that ready so that next session we can have backgrounds and another short story time. Honestly, Bathhouse scene was not bad at all for me to DM because my players really enjoyed doing their own descriptions for it. And honestly, with the whole bathhouse scene, I found I barely needed to do much. They mostly worked off describing what they were doing, going ham in some cases, or simply talking about what they wanted to do next in character. Honestly, I loved the scene. And when I was telling my party that I'd be telling that story today, all of them were saying that at the nearest convenience, even though they're out in the middle of a war zone right now, they're finding another bathhouse and they're doing another bathhouse scene. So we'll have to see how they make do and what the next scene entails. So then, with the vote made and time given to ask questions, unless someone else has another question they want to ask, I think it's time to start slowly rolling into a good night. Oh, yeah, you guys did play a game of Never Have I Ever in character in the bathhouse. That was definitely a fun time. Unfortunately, I couldn't remember any of the questions or any of the answers. So I simply had to leave that bit out of the story. But if either Lotus Flower or Juniper remembers anything that happened there, please feel free to post that up. I think everybody would love to hear some of the characters' questions. Wait. I need to hear more about what Junie said. It's okay. It was mostly a comedy bit. Yeah, but I think people love a good in character comedy bit. Let's see. I'll try to think. What were some of the questions? I don't think you all went into any of the big questions, like did you ever kill anyone or who, like what gods you pray to. But it was a lot of smaller light things, wasn't it? Junie, recall those questions for next stream. That would be fair. Unless either of you got some, ooh, one of them was Pharaoh for sure. Mentioned that a specific organ she has doesn't work. Oh, yes. The hint. The big hint on Pharaoh. And honestly, I love this as a big cliffhanger. That's right, everybody. Pharaoh, the Aarakocra cleric, isn't altogether healthy. There's something wrong. Something she feels permanently affects her. But that will come later in story time. For now, I simply wish to give you all a good night and have a happy weekend. We'll have to see what happens next time. Good night, y'all.